They've done away with all that shit. They've just put all the spicy in the beer, so you'll drink more beer. By the sounds of things,
that's right. Exactly. Yes, it's wonderful.
Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Rose and Rockstar from the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast and rockstarcmo.com. It's Saturday the 1st of February and I'm your host Ian Truscott. I'm not a rockstar, but I am a CMO. Apologies, we got off to a bit of a rocky start with this idea with scheduling and internet challenges, but the premise of this show is that my chum, author, marketing strategy expert and chief troublemaker at the Seventh Bear is in our virtual bar, the Rose and Rockstar, where he recommends one of his fabulous cocktails and I pick his brains on a marketing topic that is top of mind. This week, top of mind for me is my struggles to write a book, and as the author of a number of books, I thought I'd ask for Robert's advice. So maybe a slightly self-indulgent topic for me, but I hope you get something out of it. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back. My dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big ROAS man. Then he just kept saying things like, the bigger the ROAS, the better, over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means calculating a return on ad spend. One thing's for sure, I'll be known as the ROAS man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Oh, such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Shop Blinds.com right now and get up to 45% off select styles, plus a professional measure. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Oh, hello, my friend, and welcome to the bar.
Thank you very much. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's January.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe it's the end of January.
I
already.
know. Yeah.
And as we record this anyway, I suspect this will come out in February, which is confusing to everybody, but those who do this for a living. Yeah, here we are, and the year's going along really well, aside from the obvious nonsense going on in my country's government and the environment. Other than that, I feel like a bit like the dog in the meme. It's like, it's all going to be fine.
Yeah, and on that environment stuff, I know that the fires are all over now, but I did mention in the show last week when I did that little personal monologue as you had your internet cut off, and so I did mention that everything was fine with you and that people should listen to your this whole marketing show, because you went into detail about how the fires affected your area and all that kind of stuff. It sounded pretty scary to me, as they got reasonably close, didn't it?
Yeah, the funny thing is that I don't, unlike others in my family, I would say, and probably the more sane ones in my family, these things don't tend to scare me, like earthquakes and fires and stuff like that, storms. Yeah. Even when I was a kid, the hurricanes, when I grew up in Texas, they don't freak me out for whatever reason. Obviously I take precautions and I do all the things that I'm told to do, and, all of those things, but I don't get emotionally charged up about them. Mm-hmm. And so because I just don't I don't ever feel like my life is or my family's life is in danger.
Yeah.
I always somehow think, oh yeah, maybe we lose our stuff, but that's
nice.
I just, and it's weird. I don't ever get that charged up about them.
That sounds very grounded, and it sounds like you've got.
It
the
is. It could also be
things.
seen as very sort of naive, but it's it's but the answer is yes. We're blessed and lucky, and I mean comparatively speaking to most of the people who were affected by the fires, we got out very, very lucky.
Yeah. And and this wasn't going to be the topic for the conversation in the bar today, but I'm just curious, what is it like around where you are? I mean, because presumably there's an awful lot of devastation right in your eye line, right? You can't avoid it. Right?
Well,
it's right there.
I mean, I would say metaphorical eye line, right? I mean, because the Palisades is 30 miles from me.
Oh, okay.
And remember, Southern California is spread.
I know,
right? I mean,
yeah.
And one of the challenges, of course, is that you saw in the the national and global media did no one any favors by putting together the hyperbole maps and all that. If you looked at some of the maps they were showing on mainstream media, it was like you thought the entire city was on fire, right? And so it's a very spread out place. And so, the Palisades, as the crow flies, probably 20 miles from me, and then Altadena, Pasadena, that mountain, it's probably another 30 miles the other direction. So there's it's there. So obviously in those local communities, it's it's awful and rebuilding, and they're trying to figure out how to get people's mail to them, and there's all sorts of recovery efforts going on, and they're going to clean out all the dangerous stuff, and they got the Army Corps of Engineers going in there now to clean out lithium batteries and things that could explode, and which is a fascinating state of our technology world, where you got to clean all that stuff out before you can go sort of extract your belongings and all that kind of stuff. You got there's so many computers and computer like things that have lithium batteries that could literally just blow up at any point, right? And so you look at that and you sort of say, oh, they're but otherwise it's life as usual in Los Angeles. It's gotten back to normal.
Oh, well, that's good to hear. All right, so well, let's get back on to our agenda, and I think the thing we need most when we've just walked into a bar is a drink. So what cocktail are we going for this week?
We do indeed. And so 2 weeks ago we got an escape out of here and went to Mexico for the weekend to just unwind a bit.
Yeah.
And there I discovered one of my favorite things in the world is Mexican beer. I'm a huge fan of Tecate and Dos Equis, and I'm not a big fan of Corona, but I do love Mexican beer, generally speaking. And so there's a beer cocktail that we're going to have called the Mayan Michelada. And it starts with beer, of course. Now what you do is you have to have a salt rim glass here, but it's a salt and cayenne pepper. So you rub your lime wedge around the edge of the glass, and then of course you have a salt and cayenne pepper to taste, sort of mix to rim your glass with. And then you add lime juice, a little bit of Worcestershire sauce, Tabasco, and black pepper. And if you like it, I don't love celery salt, but they sometimes put celery salt in there too.
Yeah.
And then you fill it full of beer. And it's a spicy, delicious, wonderful way to have a beer.
That, and I mean, one of my favorite things, especially in the US, and a good Mexican restaurant and a Dos Equis in a nice frosted glass, because you know how to make a frosted glass. But that to me sounds like, like you always have nuts and spicy things on the bar to encourage you to drink. They've done away with all that shit. They've just put all the spicy in the beer so you'll drink more beer by the sounds of things.
That's right. Exactly. Yes. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And you have to have it with Mexican beer. I mean, you can you could try a German lager or something like that, but it's not nearly as good with a German lager as it is with a Mexican.
And yes, not with all that spiciness. So that's a great cocktail suggestion. But while I'm here in the bar with you, Mr. Rose, I'd like to pick your brains about a challenge that I have right now, and that is, as you know, and as some of the listeners know, because I keep banging on about it, is I am trying to write a marketing book. Now, you've written half a dozen marketing books, I think, in your time, some collaboratively, some on your own. Is it 6 books? 5, 6 books?
A book.
It is, isn't it? You've written. How many have you written? You did the your first one, which was about managing content marketing. You've done a couple with Joe, haven't you? You did one with Carla.
That's right. I've done. So the first one came out in 2010, and that was managing content marketing with Joe.
Yeah.
I've written 4 total.
Oh, 4.
Yeah. And so the second one was Experiences, the 7th era of marketing. I wrote with Carla Johnson.
That's it.
And did a self-publishing on that. The third was Killing Marketing, again with Joe, and that was with McGraw-Hill, big publisher.
Yeah.
And the fourth, which came out in 23, was a content marketing strategy.
Nice. Yes. And I have all of them. You know that, right? So, you must be. Are you due another book? Are you going to write another book?
Did you ask him, am I going to do another one?
Yeah. Are you due another one? Are we going to get another book from you, do you think?
Yeah. Yes is the answer. I'm really hesitant to write another marketing book. As such. But I do want to write. Yes, I do. I have ambitions to do it. Put it that way, but nothing in the immediate future. Let's put it that way.
Right. I think with your screenwriting skills, you should write a fictional book. I'd love to hear. I'd love to know what fiction's in your head, because you're also a fan of sci-fi.
That's where I started, right? I mean, I started writing screenplays and plays when I first moved here to Los Angeles. It was the reason I moved to Los Angeles was because I wanted to be a writer. And write plays and screenplays, and quickly disabused myself of the notion of that would actually make money. And by the way, I had the same. I disabused myself of the same thing when I wrote my first business book. Either it is not. Right. You don't do it for the money, for sure.
Yeah. It's for the credibility, isn't it? It's like your business card is why you write a business book, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a calling card, right? I mean, as a consultant, what I used to say is that writing book adds another 0 to your billing rate.
Nice.
And it does. But it, more than anything else, it becomes the marketing piece by which you sort of center all your whatever it is you're doing, right? Whether you're a content creator or a consultant or you're trying to make your way as a leader in larger organizations, it becomes the calling card for how you differentiate yourself and really market yourself as an individual, right?
And I also think that did you find this, particularly with that first book of managing content marketing, did you find that it also clarified your practice in that it being forced to sit and write the book, it actually documented what you did as a consultant or as as an entrepreneur?
The last book was that. The whole purpose of the last book was exactly that. It was that I had spent, this wasn't just a marketing gimmick that I used for the book, but I had spent 10 years building my content marketing strategy class. And every year from 2013 on, I would incrementally improve it and change it and update it and incrementally change it and update it, improve it. And by 2022, I really by COVID, I just COVID threw everything for a disruption.
Yeah.
But really by 2022, I felt like it's done, right? Like my little masterwork or whatever is done here, and I want to document it. Yeah. And when Kogan Page, which is the UK-based publisher who came a-calling and said, "Hey, do you have a book in you that you want to do? We would love to, entertain a pitch from you." I said, "Oh, well, it's interesting timing because I want to write this book, but just fair warning, it's geeky, right? It's a textbook. It's not a get everybody wound up like a Malcolm Gladwell book or something like that. It's very much a how-to textbook." And they were like, "Well, that's exactly what we want." And I was like, "Okay, well, great." And that one became that because I was going, either way, I was going to document it with a long form piece of content, and they just happened to come along and want to publish it. So, but the rest of them, no. I haven't. I would say doing the research for the book would clarify things or make more concrete, mostly in the sense that I would have to go find examples or those kinds of things which supported my arguments. And so those would become, and especially when I would get to interview people, you'd get to validate your thinking in that way. So some clarification there, but not in the actual, like the writing of a book. I find the discoveries you make, somebody said at one point, the reason to write a book is not because you have a big answer, it's because you have a big question.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And so, but you have a hypothesis to the answer.
Yeah.
And in other words, the book becomes, the reason to write the book is because you're trying to answer a big question. But it's not the answer that you're looking for. You're looking to explore the question and press on your own thinking. And so, but I find that mostly what you end up doing is ultimately finding out where your hypothesis works and where it doesn't work, I guess. Is the answer.
I like that. And I also think that we've talked about this in terms of using AI, right? And the fact that these days, if you're going to use AI to write anything, you're cheating yourself out of the journey that you would go on, because quite often, and even if I'm writing a blog post, what you've just said really resonates with me, because I'll start off with an idea of what I'm going to write. But actually, during the journey of writing it, I discover that actually what the outcome isn't what I expected. I've actually discovered something else in thinking about it, and the thing has taken a bit of a turn. So I imagine that's even bigger for a book, right? I really like this idea that you're trying to answer a question through that process.
Yeah, I mean, so here's what I would say to that is that my process, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit, but my process is I start with a hypothesis, and then I'm a big outliner, right? I'm not one for writing like discovering as I go, right?
Right.
So I kind of work out all the arguments into a fairly replete, like sometimes 10 or 15 pages of an outline of all the chapters and what my main thesis. I mean, this is just something I took from my screenwriting and playwriting days, which is you start with a pretty robust outline. Like you want to be able to see the arcs. You want to be able to see the beginning and the argument to make sure it all hangs together well, that you're not putting too much into one area, that you're not overweighting one argument only to belie yourself in the last chapter. All these things you want to sort of be able to have in your head, which is very hard to do when you're looking at 40,000 words, but it's much easier to do when you're looking at, 5,000 words, right?
Yeah.
And so my outlines are sort of working. That's where I do most of my research is really figuring out the outlines. And then by the time that I'm ready to actually write the chapters, what I'm doing is trying to make it entertaining, right? I'm trying to make it fun and engaging and poetic and, all the rest of it. And all the quote unquote facts are kind of worked out.
Yeah. So, and are you a sort of index card kind of, because I've actually got involved a little bit with some writing groups and talked to some people that are their process. So is your process kind of a manual process with index cards and stuff like that? Or is it a virtual document that you just go straight through and then you kind of build and build and build?
I start with, in many cases, I start with, it's all Word docs at the end of the day. You know what I mean? It's like, it all starts in in Microsoft Word docs, only because I hate Google Docs so much.
Right.
And I don't resonate with all those sort of, online, distraction-free writing. It's like, okay, well, just shut everything down. I don't need a special app to be distraction-free.
Right.
So Word is fine, right? And and I've learned using Word to not give a shit how it looks, right? In other words, the expressing, the real art of that first draft is just writing it, right? It's just writing. Don't edit it. Don't wordsmith it. Don't, get the ideas out, and as rough as they are. And so that's the real sort of key there is that, you write, it starts as literally a paragraph, a sort of an abstract. I write the abstract first. Then I turn it into a very brief outline of what I think the chapters would be, topics that I'm going to cover and everything. Then I take that brief outline, and then I work it into a replete outline, which is that 10-page or 15-page document that I talked about. And then if I have any frameworks, I often will sketch those. I'll often get literally a pen and a piece of like a legal pad and just sketch them out so that I at least have a visual, because I'm not a designer by trade. I don't. And I'll ultimately have a designer design those things for me. But the framework itself, the visualization of it, I usually have something in my head. So I just want to get it out on paper. But then I can draw it. I'm not going to rough up a PowerPoint slide or something like that. It's just, I usually just draw it.
And then are you pretty disciplined in, right, I'm going to write from 8 till 10 every morning or every evening, or are you as kind of ad hoc when it comes to writing? How do you
100%. No, 100% discipline. You just give up. The way I always talk about it is you give up your weekends for 6 months. You give up your weekends for 6 months, right? Because you can't do it. Me personally, I can't do it during the work week.
Right.
I mean, there may be an occasional work week where I've got nothing going on a Friday or something like that. So it's like, I can spend the day writing. It's like, but that's really rare because you're responding to email, you're got a client call, you got this thing going, you got stuff that's commanding your attention. And what I do is just lock myself away. Usually Saturdays. Saturdays were my writing day, right? I would get up and I would have my coffee and my light breakfast and do whatever I'm going to do. And then I would write for a good, 6 hours.
Wow.
Just that was my Saturdays for 6 months.
Yeah. And then you just mentioned there that you just write, almost free write at first. Yeah. And then you go back and do the edits, do you, after that?
Correct. And I usually go out of order, right?
Okay.
So I write, so often I'll write, and this is another thing that I picked up from my screenwriting and playwriting days. I'll often do the Pixar thing. I'll write the ending first.
Oh, wow.
And so I'll write the last chapter, and then I'll go to a middle chapter, and then I'll go to the introduction, and then I'll go to another chapter. And I just I work out of order because it forces me to make sure that I'm making callbacks and through lines that make sense, because I have to refer back to things, right?
Right.
I find that it's really, if you go linearly, what I find is that it's really easy to you start to let your prose, you start to let your creativity get you off track, right? So it's a little bit, the metaphor I often use, it's a little bit like you're the airline captain and you're flying and you start to get 1 degree off, and then 2 degrees off, and then 3 degrees off, but you don't really notice it because it's just so slow. But by the time you get to the second to last chapter, it's like you're so way off topic that you have to bring it all back. And you can really even see that in a lot of business books, I find, right? Where they start with a very powerful argument in their foreword or their first chapter, right? Which is usually the most interesting chapter of any business book, is the first chapter. And then all of a sudden, chapter 2 gets, sort of takes the argument one place, and then chapter 3 starts to move it there. By the time they get to chapter 10 and they're ready to conclude things, they're like, the conclusion is like, wait a minute, this is not how this book started out, right? What are you talking about? And so that I try and avoid that as much as I can by writing out of order.
Yeah, that's interesting. And do you, when you're editing, and I should really let you go in a sec, but when you're editing, do you then really refine one chapter and make that really good and then move on to the next one? Or is it you go through the whole book and then that's that?
The latter. I go through the whole book in a rough, and then I go back and polish. That I do linearly. Once it's done, then I go back to the beginning and I start rewriting. What I do is I make sure that the arguments make sense, so that I can, whatever I'm saying is, I can pressure test, I can, and that's really that's the first time after that next rewrite, that's the first time I'll send it to an editor. And when I've been blessed before to have an editor who really knows their stuff, which I think is so important for for any writer to work with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want somebody who's going to correct my grammar or all that that will come later. I want somebody who's going to press on the ideas like, nah, you haven't really made your point here. Like,
Right.
or this is, you've said this, you've duplicated this point 4 times, right? So, make it simpler and all of that. I want that sort of context editing, which I've been very blessed in 3 of my books to have somebody like that.
So that then suggests that you needed like a subject matter expert as that first edit then to go through. Somebody that understands what it is.
Well, you need someone who understands who you don't necessarily need a content matter subject. What you need is someone who is willing to read the book from the perspective of the audience and say, did I successfully make my argument or not? Right.
Yeah.
So, they don't have to, in other words, I don't mean this the way it's going to sound, but at that point, I'm probably not wrong. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not a question of checking me for accuracy, because I'm not writing the kind of book that, you're not writing a biography of somebody, or you're not writing something where that you're ultimately getting a situation wrong or needs to be fact checked in a lot of different ways. What you're writing is an opinion, right? You're writing, it's basically one large op-ed, right? Which is most business books. And so it's definitely, you're not looking for someone to disagree with your point of view, because if that's the, if they're disagreeing with your point of view, you're in a really bad spot, right? With the book. But what you're looking for is to someone to say, I understand what you're saying. Even if they don't agree with it, I understand what you're saying, but you haven't made your point clearly enough, right?
Right. And I really like this topic, and it'd be great to dig into it because I have so many more questions, but I better let you get on. And if somebody was looking for carefully crafted, written on a Saturday for 6 hours content, where are they going to find that, Robert?
They'll find it at our lovely little website, which we're getting better and better at, which is seventhbear.com. And then, of course, on our little blog there, and then on Content Marketing Institute, of course, I'm still writing for them.
Yeah. And when people spin the dial on the interwebs and they want to connect with you and ask you questions about writing books, where would they find you?
They'll find me on LinkedIn. That's the best place. LinkedIn and Blue Sky. I think I'm giving Threads up. I don't think I'm going to care. I'm going to keep my namespace there, but I'm just not hanging out on Threads anymore. That. So I think I'm going to go all in on Blue Sky for my other social media network.
Splendid. And most importantly for me, will you be behind the bar next week?
Apparently. That's what I hear.
I look forward to it, mate. I'll see you then. So that's a wrap on our visit to the Rose and Rockstar. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Robert. I've known the guy for over a decade and I've never really drilled into his process before, so I enjoyed that. Plus, as I mentioned, of course, if you're interested in writing a book, there's a splendid UK-based podcast called The Extraordinary Business Book Club, which is just wonderful. Alison Jones is the host, and her courses are excellent. Next week, I will continue this conversation about being an author with Robert. And if you have a topic or question you'd like to discuss in the safe space of the bar, or have any feedback on the changes I've made to the podcast, please get in touch via LinkedIn. Just search for Rockstar CMO, or through our website, rockstarcmo.com, where you can also find all of the show notes, plus links to me, Robert, and all the things we discussed. This week, Kathy McKnight is back in the studio on Wednesday, and as you heard, Robert will be back in the bar on Saturday. So hopefully you'll join us again soon here on Rockstar CMO FM.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.